Ready? Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. And Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa Purudikacharya Ashtottara Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Purudikacharya Ashtottara Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Antonella, I think you have my book. I'll trade you for this one. Has that fancy bookmark. You see that gold hanging out there? Did you see what's at the end of that gold?
No.
Oh, this is incredible.
Oh, wow.
It's Krishna.
That's
Can you
so
see?
special.
Someone gave that to me. And now I'm using it to mark my place here in Bhagavad Gita. Okay. Alrighty. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay. Yes. Okay. On this third day of January 2023 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 10, entitled The Opulence of the Absolute. Text number 9 on page 431. In most of your books, it's going to be on a different page number, but it's 10:9. He's got a different. Okay, you got it? 10:9? Okay. Okay. Machita Madgata Prana Bodhiyanta Parasparam Katayantash Chamam Nityam Tushyanti Charamanti Cha. 431, Chris. Bhushan, page 431. Okay. Machita Madgata Prana Bodhiyantak Parasparam Katayantash Chamam Nityam Tushyanti Charamanti Cha. Machita Madgata Prana Bodhiyantak Parasparam Katayantash Chamam Nityam Tushyanti Charamanti Cha. Machita Madgata Prana Bodhiyantak Parasparam Katayantash Chamam Nityam Tushyanti Charamanti Cha. Machita Madgata Prana Bodhiyantak Parasparam Katayantash Chamam Nityam Tushyanti Charamanti Cha. Machita Madgata Prana Bodhiyantak Parasparam Katayantash Chamam Nityam Tushyanti Charamanti Cha. Ross. Machita Madgata Prana Bodhiyantak Parasparam Katayantash Chamam Nityam Tushyanti Charamanti Cha. Bhushan, you want to try? Machita Madgata Prana Bodhiyantak Parasparam Katayantash Chamam Nityam Tushyanti Charamanti Cha. Ladies? Machita Madgata Prana Bodhiyantak Parasparam Katayantash Chamam Nityam Tushyanti Charamanti Cha. Machita Madgata Prana Bodhiyantak Parasparam Katayantash Chamam Nityam Tushyanti Charamanti Cha. Okay, I'll read the synonyms, read along. Matchitaha, their minds fully engaged in me. Mat gata pranaha, their lives devoted to me. Bodhiyantaha, preaching parasparam among themselves. Katayantaha, talking cha also mam about me. Nityam, perpetually. Tushyanti, become pleased. Cha also ramanti, enjoy transcendental bliss. Cha also. Translation. Lord Krishna says to Arjuna, The thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. Their lives are fully devoted to my service, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another and conversing about me. Purport. Pure devotees, whose characteristics are mentioned here, engage themselves fully in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Their minds cannot be diverted from the lotus feet of Krishna. Their talks are solely on the transcendental subjects. The symptoms of the pure devotees are described in this verse specifically. Devotees of the Supreme Lord are 24 hours daily engaged in glorifying the qualities and pastimes of the Supreme Lord. Their hearts and souls are constantly submerged in Krishna, and they take pleasure in discussing him with other devotees. In the preliminary stage of devotional service, they relish the transcendental pleasure from the service itself. And in the mature stage, they are actually situated in love of God. Once situated in that transcendental position, they can relish the highest perfection which is exhibited by the Lord in his abode. Lord Chaitanya likens transcendental devotional service to the sowing of a seed in the heart of the living entity. There are innumerable living entities traveling throughout the different planets of the universe, and out of them there are a few who are fortunate enough to meet a pure devotee and get the chance to understand devotional service. This devotional service is just like a seed, and if it is sown in the heart of a living entity, and if he goes on hearing and chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, that seed fructifies, just as the seed of a tree fructifies with regular watering. The spiritual plant of devotional service gradually grows and grows until it penetrates the covering of the material universe and enters into the Brahmajyoti effulgence in the spiritual sky. In the spiritual sky also, that plant grows more and more until it reaches the highest planet, which is called Goloka Vrindavan, the supreme planet of Krishna. Ultimately, the plant takes shelter under the lotus feet of Krishna and rests there. Gradually, as a plant grows fruits and flowers, that plant of devotional service also produces fruits, and the watering process in the form of chanting and hearing goes on. This plan of devotional service is fully described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 19. It is explained there that when the complete plant takes shelter under the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, one becomes fully absorbed in love of God. Then he cannot live even for a moment without being in contact with the Supreme Lord, just as a fish cannot live without water. In such a state, the devotee actually attains the transcendental qualities in contact with the Supreme Lord. The Srimad Bhagavatam is also full of such narrations about the relationship between the Supreme Lord and his devotees. Therefore, the Srimad Bhagavatam is very dear to the devotees, as stated in the Bhagavatam itself, 12, 13, 18. Srimad Bhagavatam Puranam Amalam Yad Vaishnavanam Priyam. In this narration, there is nothing about material activities, economic development, sense gratification, or liberation. Srimad Bhagavatam is the only narration in which the transcendental nature of the Supreme Lord and his devotees is fully described. Thus, the realized souls in Krishna consciousness take continual pleasure in hearing such transcendental literatures, just as a young boy and girl take pleasure in association. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So before I begin, I would like to thank you all for taking the trouble on this night threatening again to rain and cold and inconvenience to come out and allow me to share my meager realizations about Bhagavad Gita with you. And that goes for everyone online as well, scattered throughout North America. So this is the second in what is known as the 4 essential verses of the Bhagavad Gita, as many of you know. And these verses really describe, in summary, obviously, this process of Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojana. Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojana, which Lord Chaitanya says in his teaching to Sanatana Goswami, are really the only subject matter in the Vedas. The Vedas deal with these subject matters in relationship, of course, to devotional service to Krishna. So what is this Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojana? Sambandha means understanding the relationship between God and the living entities and the material nature. There's a three-part relationship there. And much of this has been described before. What comes to mind immediately is chapter 7, where Krishna describes the material energies, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego, as his lower prakriti, apara prakriti he calls it. And the para prakriti are the jivas. Apare mitastranyam prakritam vidyame param jiva bhutam mahabaho yedam dharyate jagat. So besides these 8 inferior energies, which are progressively more subtle, up even to the point of false ego, there is a higher energy which consists of the living entities who are dharyate jagat, exploiting it or sustaining it. Just like in each body that we occupy, where it stays as a body, they're made of these same energies, lower energies, but it is a living organism because we're inside as the living soul. So we're sustaining it, we're holding it up. Dharyate, giridhari, same word, holding up the hill. Until we leave, and then the body just reverts to its elements. It has to be burned, buried, whatever. So, what the first verse we had, text 8, which those who are here are familiar with this part of the Bhagavad Gita. There's all these quotes from the Vedas. Did you notice that? I was reading these long, most of them are prose passages, and it's all simply establishing that Krishna or Narayan is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the source of everything. Before there was, one of them went, before there was Brahma, before there was Shiva, before there was the sun and the moon and everything, there was Krishna. And that's, in other words, before there was any material manifestation, as he says in the 4 essential verses of the Bhagavatam, which are very similar to this, there was God, there was Krishna. Ahameva sameva gre nanya jet sadasat param, he says in the second canto of Bhagavatam, the Chatur Shloki Bhagavatam, the essential Bhagavatam that was spoken by Krishna to Brahma, and then Brahma then expanded it more into what we have now, given it to Narada, Narada gave it to Vyasa, gave it to Shukadeva, like that. So, in the first verse, he says, Krishna says, Aham sarvasya prabhavo. Right away he says, I am the source of everything that you see. And mattak sarvam pravartate. Now this is interesting because it seems to be saying the same thing. But he's saying it from our point of view. From me, everything comes. In other words, from your point of view, you see the everything, you know that it's I who came from. From my point of view, I'm saying that there was nothing and then I produced it all. So, aham sarvasya prabhavo, mattak sarvam pravartate. Now, if we understand that, as he says in the third quarter here, para, iti madva bhajante mam buddha. Those who are intelligent and understand this and have faith in these words of mine, and then they worship me with all their heart. That is the second thing. So he's gone even from the first line where he says, I am the source of everything, which is pure Sambandha. Whatever you see, even your own selves, I am the source. And so you have an unbreakable relationship with me because I created you and you're part and parcel of me, and we know that we are also Brahman, right? Isn't that, do they still teach that? I remember when I joined the ashram, one of the first things you learn is Aham Brahmasmi. Or in more colloquial terms, you're not that body, Prabhu. You're a pure spirit soul. Go and wash the pots, or whatever, like that. So that's the idea. We're part and parcel of Krishna, so we have his qualities in a minute degree, but we're infinitesimal and he's infinite. That's the idea. So the first line is pure Sambandha. Then the next line is pure Abhideya. Abhideya is the practice. The practice. All of the 9 basic practices of devotional service we learned from Prahlad Maharaj. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam. I'm not going to go through all these 9, but these are what we do here in the Hare Krishna movement. Beginning with hearing. Hearing is the most important. And hearing includes reading. Reading is also made even more potent when you read out loud. If you have you ever read with God brothers or God sisters, you know, it's very enlivening. And that's what Krishna says in the next verse, the verse we just read. Bodhiyantak parasparam. Parasparam means you hear and chant together and enlighten one another. So in the second line there, he's talking about the practice. Those who understand this, they worship me bhava samandvita, with great attention, with all their hearts. And how do they do it? He continues with this Abhideya practice. Matchitta madgata prana. They place their mind on me. Matchitta, think of me. This is the first thing. And madgata prana, they dedicate their lives to me, their life energy. And bodhiyantak parasparam, they get, this parasparam means they get together and they talk about me, preaching about me. Katayanta, kata is talking, about nityam, perpetually. And I like to point this out, I think I pointed out last night, because we also were dealing with these verses, that when you study Prabhupada's life, you know, especially the life that was so prominent after he came to America, he was just talking of Krishna constantly, either talking, typing, dictating, glorifying Krishna, right? And hearing the glorification. When he would lead the kirtans, and he would listen as we would respond with the Hare Krishna mantra. That's the purest form of bodhiyantak parasparam. Is you chant the holy name, I listen, I chant the Hare Krishna mantra, you listen, and this is Sankirtan. And there's no distinction, there's no hierarchy of, okay, Prabhu, you've only been in the movement 1 year, you stand in the back, well, you know, the seniors stand. It's not like that. Everybody is just raise up your voices and absorb yourself in the holy name. So that's pure katayantas chamam nityam, always chanting my glories with each other. And what's the result? Tushyanti and ramanti. So tushyanti means becoming very pleased and satisfied, and ramanti means enjoying transcendental bliss. So this is all part of Abhideya, and we're also getting into Prayojana here. Prayojana is the final goal of this process, and that's pure love of God. So if you read this wonderful pair of verses where Rupa Goswami describes the progression from faith to love, from Shraddha to Prema, it's really nice to understand this, because those who are trying to practice devotional service, we're somewhere along on that ladder, and we want to keep progressing nicely. So it begins with faith, Shraddha. But this isn't pure and powerful faith. This is preliminary faith. Enough faith to come into the association of devotees. Now, with all the media we have, that can mean opening a book. You can be in the middle of Montana somewhere, 1,000 miles from a temple, and you can have that faith. Let me open that book and associate with these thoughts, these ideas, Srila Prabhupada. And that's what's so incredibly valuable about the books. You're actually, the most important association with the Guru is with the Vani, with the words. Prabhupada emphasized this as he was preparing to leave. I was in the movement, I joined in 73, and I remember 76, his health started to get a little weak. We heard he was in Bombay taking treatment, you know, and 77, after the Mayapur festival, it was, you know, he was more and more experiencing difficulties in his health. So it became obvious that, you know, he was over 80 years old, that he could depart at any moment, as he would say anyway, all the time. So then he would, I remember there's one purport in the 4th canto, I forget which verse it was, where he said there are two ways of association with anyone, really. Vapu and Vani. Vapu means personally with, you know, the personality, what we commonly call association. And Vani means through the words. And he said the association with the spiritual master, with Krishna, through the words is the most important. That's what we're doing here. We're with Krishna on the battlefield. We should understand that, how fortunate we are. We shouldn't think, oh boy, Arjuna was so lucky. Of course he was, fortunate, intimate associate with Krishna. But if we approach the Gita the same way Arjuna did, with faith and receptivity, we'll get the same benefit. We can also feel the presence of Krishna through his words. And the same thing goes for Srila Prabhupada's purports. So that association is all important. And as that Shraddha brings us, then we become inspired to begin bhajan. Then we're associating sadhu sangha, and then we should be inspired to begin bhajan, which means usually chanting Hare Krishna. All right, let me try it. Prabhu, do you have any extra beads? Yeah, okay. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Oh, I got to go to work. Okay, I got one round done. Or whatever, however it may start, right? I started with 2 rounds. I was 2 rounds. I was working at the time. I had an apartment and a car. That was it. I didn't have a big family to worry about, but I did have those things. And I integrated it into my schedule. I was doing a lot of Hatha yoga. This is way back in 72. But I wanted to chant, and I had some beads. I had visited the temple, so I would do that regularly. And then on the way to work, I had about a 20-minute drive and singing Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare. And then when I got to the hospital, I worked in the hospital. And of course, I was experiencing the benefit of chanting, so I was trying to apply that to the patients and see if I could cure them, by projecting Hare Krishna mantra. It worked for my father. I'll tell you this story. This is an interesting story. My father had a stroke. He was only 62, and I was already I think I was already in the movement. It was late 72. I was doing a lot of chanting, and I was getting ready to join the temple. But he and the doctors were very pessimistic. They said, "Oh, this type of stroke is usually fatal." My mother was freaking out. So he was in a hospital, right, not the one I was working at, but right near where I lived, actually, just a short drive. So I went over there one day. My mother wasn't there at that point. And I walked in, and my father it was a darkened room, and the nurses, said, well, you can stay for some time, So I didn't know what I was doing, but I put my hand on his head, knowing the stroke is, the brain. And I stayed there, and I was just projecting. I had this whole thing about chanting in my head at the time. Mostly I was doing a lot of japa in my head. So I was very, concentrated. And for maybe 10 minutes, 12 minutes, 15 minutes. Then the nurse came in, and I had to leave. So the doctors had been very pessimistic, and he recovered from that stroke. He was 62. He lived to be 80. And he wasn't, he had some effects of the stroke. He couldn't walk so well. He had to use a cane and everything, but he didn't have any problems speaking and stuff like that. He met the governor of New York. He mobilized because he was into politics to lobby for the seniors to get more like Medicare or something, whatever they had at that time. He had a whole career. And they would always ask me, when are you coming out of that thing? And I... So he didn't really understand. My mother was very favorable. She had a BTG subscription. Those days it came out every month. And I was the editor, she was proud of that. So. But anyway, you start practicing, that's bhajana kriya. And especially in the association of devotees, then you become more and more serious. Now, well, I want to be like these devotees. I want to get initiated. And so you do the things that you need to do to get initiated, And that's a very important point, because like you confirmed, you take vows, I will chant 16 rounds, I will follow these 4 regular principles, and that all helps you to progress faster. And it's all a process of purification. It's called anartha nivritti. As you chant and practice, anarthas are those things you don't want. All these unfulfilled material desires that you have, anxieties, karma that is all weighing you down, material tendencies. Those are all anarthas, things that are impeding your devotion. So those become nivritti by the power of your association and your sadhana, if you're serious. And then you come to the point of nishta. Nishta is a firm faith. This is real faith, as defined by Lord Chaitanya in his teaching to Sanatana Goswami. Shraddha shabde vishwas korhe sudradhanishchoy Krishna bhakti korle sarva karma krita hoy. The Shraddha, this mature and firm faith, is the unshakable conviction that just by performing the practice of devotional service and advancing, all my aspirations and all my necessities of life will be provided. In other words, this is all I need to do within the realm of devotional service. Now that may, of course, include, you have to work, you have to support yourself, and not everyone can live in the temple. But it means that whatever you're doing it in the context of Krishna consciousness. I'm working so that I can keep body and soul together, maintain myself so that I can practice devotional service and help others to become Krishna conscious. You see your life as dedicated to Krishna. And as you do that, everything becomes more and more tasty. The ruchi increases. Like a ruchi for chanting. you may chant, and sometimes it's pretty blissful, and it has an effect, obviously, But to really read about how the acharyas are tasting the holy name, there's a famous verse by Rupa Goswami. He said, Tunde tandavani ratim vatanute tundavali labdeye karna kroda kadambani gatayate karnar budebhyaks piham. Chetak prangana sangini vijayate sarvendriyana kutim norjane janikaki adviramitai krishneti varnadvahi. This is like the standard for how the highest standard of tasting the nectar of the holy name. And we should know that this is actually the nature of the name, that we can't taste it. It's just like because we're covered by all, of various levels of the modes of nature, and we're not pure yet. But we're tasting something, but we should know we can increase it more and more and more. So what he's saying is that, first, Norjane, and the last line is, I don't know how much nectar these two syllables, Krishna, have produced. When I chant them, I want to have, they seem to dance within my mouth, and I want to have millions of tongues and mouth in order to taste the nectar of the name. When they enter into my ears, I want to have thousands of ears so I could drink that nectar of the sound of the holy name. And when it enters into the courtyard of the heart, all the senses become inert, and the mind becomes completely fixed on Krishna. Lord Chaitanya heard this verse. It was part of a play called the Dagda Madhava, the famous play that he had been writing for some time. And so Lord Chaitanya brought all his intimate associates to see Rupa Goswami, who was then visiting him in Jagannath Puri. He did for 6 months or something. And there was, I think, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, Haridas Thakur was there, Ramananda Roy, Swarup Damodar, all of the intimate associates. And Haridas started dancing in ecstasy when he heard it, And Ramananda Roy and the others said, this is not poetry, this is a shower of nectar in the form of words, like beginning of Anchalila, the first chapter, it's all filled with these things like this. So this is what the holy name really is, There's so many, I'll give you 2 more verses, I put them into poetry. So one goes, Maduram Maduram etam, Mangalam Mangalanam, Sakaladigamavalli, Satpalam Chitswarupam, Sakadabipadighitam, Shraddaya Helayava, and Bhagavadgita Tadiyet Krishna Nama. So it says, of sweet things, it's the sweetest you will taste at any time. Of things that bring good fortune, it's the perfect paradigm. Of all the Vedic writings, it's the transcendental fruit, the very form of spirit, unalloyed and absolute. When uttered even once with faith, or uttered once with none, from birth and death it surely will deliver anyone. And in the end it brings pure love for Krishna, life's true aim. So cast away all doubt and chant Shri Krishna's holy name. And the other one, maybe familiar with this verse. Chetodharpanam arjanam bhavamahadavagni nirvapanam shreyak kaida bachandrika patadanam vidyavadhu jivanam anandam buddhivardhanam pratipadam purnamita swadanam sarvatmasnaparam param vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam. This is kind of the basis of the whole Hare Krishna movement. This verse was written by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's the first verse of the Shikshashtaka. 8 verses of instruction on the holy name. So what he says, I put it into a poem. So he says, all glories to the chanting of Shri Krishna's holy names, which easily extinguishes samsara's blazing flames by polishing the lust-encrusted mirror of the heart. That chanting is the waxing moon that knows the secret art of causing the white lotus of good fortune to unfurl its petals far and wide throughout this bleak and blighted world. Of transcendental knowledge, which will take us to life's goal, the chanting of the name of Krishna is the life and soul. The ocean of ecstatic bliss floods far beyond its bounds, wherever Krishna's merciful and mystic name resounds. Indeed, whenever Krishna's names are sung in congregation, at every step one tastes a joy that knows no limitation. So hear with great attention as I earnestly request, please chant Shri Krishna's holy names and be supremely blessed. The soothing nectar of the name will bathe your consciousness, bestow pure love for Krishna, and eradicate distress. So, this is this verse, you could write a book on this. Yes?
I would like to read it again.
Well, can I just send you my poetry file? It's in there. Dravida108 at Gmail. Send me an email, okay? Dravida108. So, back to our verses. So this is Tushanti Chadamanti. In other words, he's describing there the practice of devotional service, Abhideya, and some of the results, that it's transcendental bliss that you can feel. Now, we're going to go on with the next two verses. Maybe I should go on now. Because Krishna is describing his response when you worship him this way. And in two verses he describes how he responds to devotees when they begin seriously worshiping like this. So if there's no discussion, or if there is discussion, we can try to help out on this verse and purport. Maybe we'll go on to the next one, a very famous verse. Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam tadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upiyanti te. To those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. Purport. In this verse, the word buddhi yogam is very significant. We may remember that in the second chapter, the Lord, instructing Arjuna, said that he had spoken to him of many things and that he would instruct him in the way of buddhi yoga. Now buddhi yoga is explained. Buddhi yoga itself is action in Krishna consciousness. That is the highest intelligence. Buddhi means intelligence, and yoga means mystic activities or mystic elevation. When one tries to go back home, back to Godhead, and takes fully to Krishna consciousness in devotional service, his action is called buddhi yoga. In other words, buddhi yoga is the process by which one gets out of the entanglement of this material world. The ultimate goal of progress is Krishna. People do not know this. Therefore, the association of devotees and a bona fide spiritual master are important. One should know that the goal is Krishna. And when the goal is assigned, then the path is slowly but progressively traversed, and the ultimate goal is achieved. When a person knows the goal of life but is addicted to the fruits of activities, he is acting in karma yoga. When he knows that the goal is Krishna but he takes pleasure in mental speculations to understand Krishna, he is acting in jnana yoga. And when he knows the goal and seeks Krishna completely in Krishna consciousness and devotional service, he is acting in bhakti yoga or buddhi yoga, which is the complete yoga. This complete yoga is the highest perfectional stage of life. A person may have a bona fide spiritual master and may be attached to a spiritual organization, but if he is still not intelligent enough to make progress, then Krishna from within gives him instructions so that he may ultimately come to him without difficulty. The qualification is that a person always engage himself in Krishna consciousness and with love and devotion render all kinds of services. He should perform some sort of work for Krishna, and that work should be with love. If a devotee is not intelligent enough to make progress on the path of self-realization, but is sincere and devoted to the activities of devotional service, the Lord gives him a chance to make progress and ultimately attain to him. So this is, now Krishna is describing what he's going to do on his side, because bhakti means an exchange. It's not one-sided. Bhakti, literally you look it up in the dictionary and you'll see it's a reciprocal exchange. So the first two verses, first of all, we understand that Krishna is God, and then we worship him with all the heart. How do we do it? That's the second verse. Place our mind in him, dedicate our life to him, and hear and chant about him, and do the other process of devotional service, the essential, which are all accompanied by hearing and chanting. And so on Krishna's side, those who are acting that way, sattata yuktanam, who are always linked to me by the process I just outlined, and which he also mentioned at the end of the last chapter, manmana, bhavamad bhakto, madhyaji, mam namaskaro, these four essential practices. Always think of me, become my devotee, which includes a whole list of things. Madhyaji, worship me and bow down to me. So they're always linked to me this way, hooked up, sattva bhajatam priti purvakam, and who are worshiping me with love, their affection. It's not just some dry yoga process. I give them buddhi yoga. I give them the intelligence by which they can come to me. So this is anyone who's come to Krishna consciousness over some time and has been practicing outside, maybe chanting, you can feel that intelligence. Now, of course, it comes very nicely through the books. But at the same time, Krishna is inspiring you to go here, do that. And sometimes, like I'll tell you another story. Many devotees have a story like this. So I was kind of, I was situated kind of comfortably. I had my own apartment, I had my own car, I had a job, and I had my yoga. What more do I need, But then I got kind of frustrated because I was going and visiting the devotees, and I was seeing how blissful they were, and I was saying, I got to go back to work, So I then prayed to the Super Soul. I had this beautiful painting of the Super Soul from the books. Anyone who's read the second canon has seen this. It's the one in red because it's supposed to be in the heart, and very blissful and merciful, compassionate face, So I would always meditate on it. So I said, and pray. So I was praying, please let me take the next step. Please do something. I was really seriously praying, because I was kind of stuck in a rut. So the way it worked out is that I had been working for over a year at this one place. And so I had a good work record. And then that next day on the bulletin board, they had some bulletin boards. They would put clippings from, of interest to inhalation therapists that were published in the papers or wherever. So there was a little clipping from a paper advertising another job in another hospital. And that hospital happened to be a lot closer to where I lived. And it was the night shift. And at that time, I was going into the city and doing hatha yoga, and I, a lot of commuting and everything. And I was thinking, boy, that's what I need. I'll do the night shift, and then I'll sleep a few hours, and then every day I can go to the city, which was about a half an hour from where, into New York. And I thought I would really help my sadhana. I think, well, this I'll be able to do more yoga. So I thought this must be how, the Super Soul has answered my prayer. So I applied for the job. I got the job. And then the first week was kind of training. Then the second week I was on my own. And it was a much smaller hospital. It was a night shift, so all the patients were basically asleep. There wasn't much for me to do, but I had to make the rounds. And I had been eating raw food for several years, and I was very sensitized. And I don't know if you know this, but a lot of people die in hospitals, and there's a lot of ghosts in there. And I felt, wow, this isn't. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. It was too crazy because there was no one around to talk to, and I was feeling, I should probably be in the temple. So that's what happened. I said I quit after a week. I said, well, now I don't have a job, and I really wanted to just chant a lot. So I said I might as well join the temple. And then I realized this is how the Super Soul arranged for it. He had me give up that other job, which I was kind of secure at, and then do this job, which I couldn't do. What's the point? I might as well join the temple. So Krishna works in ways like that, and mostly he's just giving us inspiration to go here, do this, and encouraging us from inside as the Super Soul. He's giving us good instruction. He's always been doing it, but we've been resisting it. We don't hear him. But once we open up the channel a little bit and we're directly praying to Krishna and we're chanting Hare Krishna, that's the essence, then he acts like that. So this is what he's saying here. I give them the inspiration by which they can advance in devotional service. And then the final verse, because it'd be good to have all these four. Tesham evana kampartam aham ajnanajam tamaha nashiyam yatma bhavasto Jnanadipena Bhasvata. To show them special mercy, I, dwelling in their hearts, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. Purport. When Lord Chaitanya was in Benares promulgating the chanting of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare, thousands of people were following him. Prakashananda Saraswati, a very influential and learned scholar in Benares at the time, derided Lord Chaitanya for being a sentimentalist. Sometimes Mayavadi philosophers criticize the devotees because they think that most of the devotees are in the darkness of ignorance and are philosophically naive sentimentalists. Actually, that's not the fact. There are very, very learned scholars who have put forward the philosophy of devotion. But even if a devotee does not take advantage of their literatures or of his spiritual master, if he is sincere in his devotional service, he is helped by Krishna himself within his heart. So the sincere devotee engaged in Krishna consciousness cannot be without knowledge. The only qualification is that one carry out devotional service in full Krishna consciousness. The Mayavadi philosophers think that without discriminating, one cannot have pure knowledge. For them, this answer is given by the Supreme Lord. Those who are engaged in pure devotional service, even though they be without sufficient education and even without sufficient knowledge of the Vedic principles, are still helped by the Supreme God, as stated in this verse. The Lord tells Arjuna that basically there is no possibility of understanding the Supreme Truth, the Absolute Truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, simply by speculating. For the Supreme Truth is so great that it is not possible to understand Him or to achieve Him simply by making a mental effort. Man can go on speculating for several millions of years, and if he is not devoted, if he is not a lover of the Supreme Truth, he will never understand Krishna or the Supreme Truth. Only by devotional service is the Supreme Truth, Krishna, pleased, and by his inconceivable energy he can reveal himself to the heart of the pure devotee. The pure devotee always has Krishna within his heart, and with the presence of Krishna, who is just like the sun, the darkness of ignorance is at once dissipated. This is the special mercy rendered to the pure devotee by Krishna. Due to the contamination of material association through many, many millions of births, one's heart is always covered with the dust of materialism. But when one engages in devotional service and constantly chants Hare Krishna, the dust quickly clears, and one is elevated to the platform of pure knowledge. The ultimate goal, Vishnu, can be attained only by this chant and by devotional service, and not by mental speculation or argument. The pure devotee does not have to worry about the material necessities of life. He need not be anxious, because when he removes the darkness from his heart, everything is provided automatically by the Supreme Lord, who is pleased by the loving devotional service of the devotee. This is the essence of the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. By studying the Bhagavad Gita, one can become a soul completely surrendered to the Supreme Lord and engage himself in pure devotional service. As the Lord takes charge, one becomes completely free from all kinds of materialistic endeavors. So you can kind of understand, the potency of Prabhupada's books is that here's someone who's speaking obviously from experience. He's not saying, he's quoting many sources, but at the same time he's giving us this incredible encouragement and speaking from his own experience. That it's realized, it's real. Unless you have an example, because this whole thing is so far out, I mean, when you think about it, this is why people say, really? God is, this is a young coward boy with a flute? Thanks, I got my own religion, I mean, it's all amazing. The whole thing is amazing. Until you start chanting. And then when you start chanting Hare Krishna, the transcendental reality, even if you don't see it, understand it explicitly and in detail, you can feel it's real. You can feel your own transformation, and it's enough if you're open to it, enough for you to investigate the books and the philosophy. And what you encounter in Prabhupada's books is the absolute certainty, experience. He's like telling you about his own experience. Yes, I went to Bhutan. Has anyone here been to Bhutan? No. But if someone comes back, especially with pictures, but even without the pictures, it's the most wonderful place, and then you believe it because you trust the person. Why would he or she lie? So that's what you're getting with Srila Prabhupada. He's realized all this, and it's coming through, and that's why the books have such potency, to pique the interest of someone who is so fortunate enough to be receptive to the message. That in itself shows some previous agata sukriti or practice of devotional service. So I'm sorry we haven't got much time. Are there any comments or questions or any of this? We can go over this again tomorrow, because these 4 verses are worth reviewing once again. They're so important. Okay, there was one other verse I wanted to share with you. Yes, go ahead, bro. There's a mic right behind you, up on the wall. Yeah, there's 2. And just put it on so the light is on. Yeah, it won't amplify, but it's important. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Speak like this. So for verse 8, Sambandha is the first 2 sentences, and then is Abhideya the last sentence?
Well, yeah, aham sarvasya pabhavo matak sambhavata. That's Sambandha.
Right.
Then as soon as he talks about bhajante imam, that's Abhideya, that's practice.
Mm.
Iti madva, those who know this about me, what does it say? Thus knowing, the intelligent person, the Buddha, worships me bhava samanvata, with all his heart.
Mm-hmm.
If they have faith in these words of mine that I'm God, then they'll worship me, if they're fortunate. And then and then in the second verse 9, he gives a hint of how the essential way to do it. First, place your mind on me, and then it's not and devote your life to me, and then get together with others and share your realizations and chant and read Bhagavad Gita together, and chant Hare Krishna. That's what he's saying. So that second verse is all about Abhideya, and then he starts describing some of the result, which is his own response, enlightening from within. Giving us. So it's a whole. It's like that second chapter, first canto, where if you get into chanting, Shushu Shoshadhana Se Vasudeva Kataruchi, you get real taste for hearing and chanting, and then Srinvatam Sukata Krishna Punyashavana Kirtana Kuridyantaksto Yabadani Vidunoti Suritsatam. That Krishna in the heart, when he sees the devotee is hearing about him very seriously, from within he cleanses. Vidunoti means literally cleansing away the abhadras, the impurities in the heart, in art and the vritti, and the same thing is going on. And then when they're somewhat cleansed, nashta prayeshu abhadreshu, by serving the book Bhagavat, the person Bhagavat, then you become irrevocable devotional service comes. That you nishta. That's that step in the path from faith to love. That platform where most of the anarthas are gone, and you're getting more and more ruchi, which matures into attraction and bhava and prema, love for Krishna. So that, of course, this is all just, in summary form. But that's why these verses are so important. Krishna is saying he's God, and he's saying what the result will be if you worship me with that understanding, that I'll help you from within to clean away and enlighten, out of my karunya, my mercy. And this word anukampitam, kampa is one of the ecstatic symptoms, right? The trembling. So anukampa means that you're empathetic, you're sympathetic, to someone's suffering. It's out of compassion, but it has, that person is suffering, and you're trembling, and you're on the same wavelength. So out of that, his anukampa, he destroys the ignorance from within the heart by shining lamp of knowledge, and then you realize, and then Arjun, the next verses are very important also. Arjun gives his realization. Param Brahma, Param Dhamma, Pavitram, Paramam Bhavan. And Prabhupada says, and the Gita is basically over after that point, but then Arjun says, well, for the benefit of everyone else, how can I see you and meditate on you in the world at large? And he gives a whole list of things, like the ocean, of bodies of water on the ocean, on the light of the sun and the moon, and of warriors, Arjun. He gives a whole list. But then he says at the end, what's the point of all this? Whenever you see any manifestation of great opulence or power or glory, that springs from but a spark of my splendor. So this is how this verse goes. That's why it's Vibhuti Yoga. All right, we better adjourn because Kirtan is going to happen very quickly. So please, if you have time, join us tomorrow for one more session this week. And we'll progress in this wonderful chapter. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol.